Imagine a day where children are guided and nurtured in a way that honors their unique humanness. A day where, instead of being expected to change in order to fit in, children can be met right where they're at. Welcome to Where They're Planted, a podcast for parents and care providers of unique children. Caring for a child with a developmental, emotional, or behavior challenge, a neurodiverse brain, or difficult early life experiences can be confusing and exhausting. On this podcast, we'll help your child flourish and strengthen their roots by helping you not only understand them, but also gain the skills to help them bloom where they're planted. We'll use brain science, nervous system tools, collaborative strategy sessions, and a deep understanding of the developmental process to create a fertile environment around your child in order to nurture their growth. I am your host, Jen Bluske, an occupational therapist with over 25 years of experience and a parent coach. My most closely held title, however, is that of a single mom of 2 thriving adopted kids, so I have walked this walk. I am truly excited to share, teach, and dive into these important topics on each episode. Welcome back to Where They're Planted. I am your host, Jen Bluske, and I am really excited to be here today for another episode. I wanted to start today by thanking you all for listening and giving feedback and sharing this podcast. It has been amazing and has warmed my heart to hear people letting me know how just these little moments of connection and communication are helping some of you guys. And so I really appreciate it. Please keep sharing and liking the podcast and leaving comments. The other thing I wanted to start by saying today is I am really excited to start answering some of your questions. I thrive on being able to connect in with parents and really talk through some of the things that each of you might be experiencing. And I wanted to open up the opportunity for parents and caregivers to start logging in and messaging me with various questions that they might want answered within this podcast. So I will leave that information today in the show notes for you. Today's episode is beginning a conversation about meltdowns. I spend so much of my days talking to parents about meltdowns, and let's just say it, meltdowns are hard. No matter what sort of version or form your child might be experiencing when they're having a meltdown, it might look like a number of things. It might be hitting or crying or kicking or running or throwing things. No matter what is going on in the moment, those meltdowns are often so impactful to our day that it sort of can overshadow the rest of our days with our kids. And so I wanted to take some time today to talk through some of the steps, the specific steps that I give parents when I'm first helping them be able to support their child who might be having meltdowns throughout the day. In all cases, we want to be able to really think through what's underlying a meltdown. But today, what I want to talk through is just really the structure of how we support a child who is dysregulated and having a meltdown in the moment. I want to give sort of what I call the SOS, like we're just going to do the first line of defense in the meltdown while we take the time as parents and caregivers and therapists to really dig underneath to help slow the responses down that children are giving us. So the first thing I wanted to set the stage with when we think about these meltdowns that kids have, and here's a caveat, it's not just kids who have meltdowns, right? So let's put this in a bigger context. Meltdowns are a nervous system response, most generally, a fight-flight response that could be for a number of reasons. This is what's under it. But we all have moments where we're not incredibly regulated and may be in a fight-flight response ourselves. Meltdowns in general are very scary for kids. And so I always start by thinking this through with parents, is that nobody wants to be in a state of utter dysregulation and meltdown. Right. So while our child might be kicking us or throwing or pulling our hair or any of the variety of things that might happen, it isn't a state that feels good for the nervous system. It doesn't feel good in the body. And so I always try to hold that level of compassion when I'm supporting a child in a meltdown state. So there's a few things that I immediately think through when I'm teaching parents or when I'm supporting a child myself who might be having a meltdown. The first thing that we're always going to consider and attune to is physical safety. All right. So obviously, we are going to do everything in our power to support physical safety for the child and for those that are supporting the child. Most often, this is going to be supported best by changing the environment in whatever way we can to create space for the child, to create boundaries where the child has the ability to move freely but can't, for example, get out into a road where they might be hurt by a car. We're going to be looking around our environment and immediately thinking to ourselves as the supportive adult, what can I do to change this environment to create safety? So I know that in my experience as a therapist and in my experience as a parent, I've lived this one frequently as a parent myself. The first thing I'm going to do is all of the things that are hard, all of the things that are throwable, things that might be breakable, they're going to be just quietly removed from the space. We're going to get everything out of the way. The reason we do this is because I want to support the child to be able to move freely without me having to stop or ask or remove something from them. For example, if a child is picking up something glass, I want to make sure that I have that out of the way. So I'm going to quickly and quietly just move things out of the space as well as I can. So in a home environment, this is something that I talk parents through. If meltdowns are happening frequently, I think about what's typically in the environment and if we need to adjust the general daily environment for a child in order to continue to support that sense of safety. I'm also going to consider creating a container for a child. What I mean by a container is in no way are we ever restraining or putting a child in a place where they're not able to have body autonomy. Okay, that's something that requires specialized training. What I mean by developing a container for the child is a place where they can experience their fight flight response, where they know that they're going to be supported. And so is this their bedroom where they have pillows and blankets that they can roll up and throw and crash against? Is this ensuring that they remain inside the house, right? So that they can't run out into the road. So we can allow them to work through their emotions in a way where they know that they can be safe. In our clinic space, we create a container or a space that is supportive and helpful inside of a room where kids can move away from us. They can move towards us. They can burrow under things. They can bang things against the wall within safety without, again, risk of danger. So those are the first two sort of quick and dirty safety considerations that I always want to think about when we're supporting a meltdown for a child. The next most important thing, and really the hardest when we're supporting children through meltdowns, is our own regulation state. So the supportive adult's regulation state in the moment when we're managing a child who's in a highly dysregulated state or a meltdown. This is so hard, right? When we might have been hit or when we might have been called, a string of words that really hit us to the core, the I hate yous, you're the worst parent in the world. How do we manage our own regulation state so as not to become dysregulated ourselves? We know research shows that meeting dysregulation with dysregulation might stop the behavior in the moment, but it's doing it through fear and shame. And those fear and shame cycles can be really impactful long-term for kids and tend to repeat themselves. And so our job as parents is to find our own sense of regulation. Now, what do I mean by that? In previous episodes talked about the sensory systems and regulation and co-regulation, and we'll continue to bring these themes and these topics up.
But our own regulation is, I am okay right now in my body, even though my arm might hurt because my kiddo just bit it, or I am sweating because I've been, putting a pillow in front of myself to keep myself safe for 20 minutes. I'm going to be okay. I'm okay in my own body. So the quick strategies that I give parents in those moments is oftentimes we don't have a lot of movement available to us when we're supporting a meltdown. So the strategy might be, can you look out the window and find a touch point tree and watch the leaves blow for 5 seconds? That's one that I used personally when my kids were in those moments of meltdown when they were younger. Can I have a rubber band on my wrist, like a hair tie or a rubber band that I can flick and pull as a fidget, or something to give me a different sensation in my body that keeps me in the here and now? If you have access to breath, some adults have access to breath and it's really useful in organizing, some don't. If you have access to breath to be able to connect in and take some deep breaths for yourself, interestingly, when you do this, 90% of the time our kids are going to do it right along with us because of mirror neurons and because of co-regulation. But in this instance, can you take a deep breath for yourself? Can you get something in your mouth? If you have the opportunity to grab a drink of water, right? Can you get something in your mouth in the moment? Can you just stomp your feet on the ground to remember that you're grounded into the earth? Can you access humming or voice for yourself in the moment in order to give yourself a little bit of input in through your sternum in order to help you know that you're grounded and calm? And so this takes time. This takes practice. I'm the first person to say that we as parents and providers are not always going to get it right. Okay. As a parent, I have lived through getting it wrong a lot. We're not always going to stay completely regulated in these moments, but we're going to strive to do our best, and we're going to strive to keep learning, and we're going to strive to keep accessing a regulated state when our kids are dysregulated. The next way that I like to think about supporting the meltdown in the moment, just when it happens, we've got to do something. Can we create some consistency during the meltdown? Now, this is for the kids who they're having one a day, they're having a couple a week. We know that it's going to be happening. We know that when something triggers the meltdown, we're going to be in a 20, 30, 40-minute dysregulated period. I find that if we can provide structure around the meltdown, it creates safety, because what it's doing is it's creating known, even though what's happening isn't incredibly helpful or useful or fun for anybody. So what structure looks like is every single time the meltdown starts, I might say the same thing. I might, if I'm able, every single time the child's going to go into their room so that they can regulate in their room, because that's where we've determined the safe container is for them. That's not a time out. That's a here's where we can find our space in order to regulate ourselves. Every single time I might turn the lights down low. Every single time I might turn the sound off in the environment. This sense of doing it the same every time creates predictability and known, which we know for our nervous system helps to regulate and calm it. I know for myself, in my own parenting experience, I needed to have sort of a mantra that I said it out loud to my kids, but really it was for myself. Mine was, first we calm, then we'll talk. Because I needed the consistency of, I'm not going to get into a verbal battle with this child, because nobody's brain is in a cognitive place to be able to problem solve together. First we calm, then we'll talk. First we calm, then we'll talk. As I was regulating myself, creating structure, creating a safe container, and letting the meltdown blow through. So that idea of consistency, of doing it the same way every time, also pulls us as parents out of the idea that if you don't stop crying, I'm taking your electronics for a week, right? Or if you get your shoes on really fast and stop, then I'm going to give you the candy. It gets us out of that sense of wishy-washy wobbling in order to help the meltdown stop. Because remember, the meltdown, once you're in a meltdown state, a fight flight state, our frontal lobe, our thinking part of our brain, isn't on anymore. So that is not the time to be using verbal language and negotiating and problem solving in order to solve the problem. As adults, we tend to go towards this problem solving and negotiating strategy. But in the moment of meltdown, we need to close the loop of the stress cycle. We need to close the loop of the dysregulation, bring the brain back online so that the child can move forward. That's the learning for the child. So the consistency and structure of what we're going to do the same every time not only helps the child have a sense of safety, but it also gives us some structure to know that this too will end eventually. I just alluded to this a little bit, but when we're in this moment of meltdown, right, when our children are just, their brains are offline, they're in their fight flight state, they might be saying, I need you to give me this, and then this will happen. And then if you don't give me this, I'm going to punch a hole in the wall. Okay. Again, our thinking brains aren't on in those moments. So all we're doing is helping the brain return to safety. We're helping the brain return to physical safety some of the time. Emotional safety. Wow, that's a big emotion. You're sad, you're mad, you're angry, you're frustrated, you're jealous. We're helping create some safety around that emotion. We're creating relational safety. So relational safety is, I see how hard this is, and this relationship can help keep you safe, kiddo. I've got you. That is the key to shifting the meltdowns eventually. But first, the first thing and the only thing we do at the beginning is we create the safety for the brain. The brain must know that it's safe in order to move forward and do all of the other things. Once the brain knows that it's safe, it doesn't need to access that level of meltdown anymore. The other thing I want to talk about within meltdowns, and I alluded to this just a few minutes ago, is this idea of closing the stress cycle. I have some kids, that I work with, and again, I've lived this one as a parent personally, is some of our kids sort of like hold their emotion. They're not sure how to express it. And then when it's expressed like a volcano erupting, like just a big old explosion of gobbledygook emotion that usually comes out in a pretty intense way that kind of plows you over a little bit. Our goal and our job is to help the child make sense of those emotions. So we're not stopping the meltdown. I have to be really honest. Can we stop the meltdown? What we're doing is we're creating the consistency and the co-regulation, the safety, the relational safety, in order for the child to eventually come back to the other side, close the stress cycle faster. Okay. Then eventually they're not going to need to have such an extreme response of the stress cycle, meaning the meltdown won't be so big. It might be like a stomping of the foot or I hate you, or I'm mad, right? Before we come back to safety, so that eventually the nervous system, the brain, the learning, the emotional intelligence, the connected communication can feel the emotion, feel the distress, feel the change in plan, whatever it is, and wave through it without the extreme highs of a meltdown. We all move through periods of distress throughout our day. That is normal. What we're doing with our kids who are melting down is we're helping them get through the stress cycle faster so they know what the other side feels like. And this is where repair comes in. So repair is like my very favorite thing to talk to parents about, because the beautiful thing is if you get it wrong in a meltdown, let's say you've had a long day and your child has hit you for the fourth time and they're screaming at you and you just aren't regulated anymore, and you say, knock it off, I'm getting out of here until you calm down, right? We've all been there. The power of repair is still there to teach the skill of regulating out of a meltdown. So what does repair look like? What repair is not is apologizing. What repair is not is having to make amends or have a consequence for the behavior that happened during the meltdown. What repair is coming back into connection with your relational partner, the parent, ideally, in a way where everybody is seen, everybody knows they're safe, and everybody knows that they are able to be heard. And when I mean heard, I'm not always even meaning verbal. So repair after a blowout might look like mom joining child in their bed, snuggling, and looking at a book together in silence. We're not talking about the fact that they just hit their sister on the head. We're coming back into connection. For some kids, they're at a place where we're able to say, wow, buddy, that was really hard. You were so mad back then. I see that you're feeling better now. I'm making sense of what just happened for the child. I'm making sense of their emotions. I'm seeing them. For some kids, it might be, whoa, you were so angry that the electronics time was done, that you were running around the room and flipping over the chairs. Whew, I can see how hard it is for you to end that electronics. You were really mad. Tomorrow, let's talk about what else we can do when you're so mad for the electronics. Do you see the shift there? Do you see how I'm coming and I'm understanding? I'm making sense of? And then tomorrow, maybe you're going to problem solve what else we could do when I'm angry, the electronics going. But we cannot problem solve when the brain is not online. So that moment of repair, of reconnection, allows the child to know that, oh, I can actually think about these things when my brain is online. I can actually have access to feeling just a little bit of that feeling that I felt when mom took the electronics away, but I don't have to experience the whole thing. And I can be okay now when I feel just that little bit of a feeling. We're modulating the feeling for our kiddo through the connection, through the repair. That returning to safety is everything in order to help flow and then eventually stop those meltdowns. And so parents always ask me, am I going to be in these meltdowns forever? Like, I can't do it. It's so much. It's so hard. And you are so right. It is so challenging to be living in a household or in a family system where there are big meltdowns happening. It takes so much regulatory capacity on the part of the parent, right? In order to be able to march through these times with our kids. And as I started with compassion towards our kids, of that way of being for those moments is terrifying, to be out of control in that way. I have quite a few kids who've been able to verbalize to me that they actually don't remember the moments of meltdown because their brains are so offline at that point. And so I honor for you that self-compassion is something that we need to be able to give ourselves in those moments. And what I find is that if we can have some sort of consistency and routine, we know we're going to do the same thing every time because that meltdown is coming. If not tomorrow, it's coming next week. We're going to do the same thing every time. It helps everybody's system settle just that little bit to give us some time to actually problem solve and support the underlying pieces as to why the meltdowns are happening in the first place. And so I want to leave you today with the idea of, what if we gave ourselves some self-compassion during the moments of meltdown? What if we were a partner to our child riding the wave with them during the meltdowns? What if we thought about the repair as just as important as what happened during the meltdown? And see if that can shift not only you, but the nuance of what's happening for your child and your family in the moment. I think I'm going to leave it there for today. If you want more, as always, we do offer our parent coaching, both individually and in a self-guided course. And all of that information is accessible in the show notes. Thank you so very much.
If you like what you heard today, check out our Empowered Parent Coaching course offered through Thriving Parents Collective. In this course, you will get videos and course content to help you learn and develop the strategies you seek to meet your child right where they're at. Go to the show notes for the link. Where They're Planted is a Lit Path Studios podcast and is produced by Jamie Gale and Jen Bluske. Music is by Gaston Reen and Pod 5. Thank you for loving your child right where they're planted.